You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Hello everyone, welcome back to episode 246 of Arsenal Pass. Hayden Dow here with Pankaj, Bhojwani as always. This week on the pod, Road to National season kicks off this weekend, and we are talking what decks you should, or maybe should at least consider playing for this coming weekend. Our each respective top 3 picks, plus we'll talk about some other decks you might want to consider, as well as what we are planning to play for this coming weekend, the first weekend of Road to National season. But before all that, Pankaj, Happy New Year, 2026. How are you doing?
Happy New Year to you too. I'm doing very well. It is New Year's Day for me as we record this. Slightly recovering from last night, but I didn't go like too hard, so that was nice. It was nice, fairly chill New Year's Eve, all things considered. And already we're just starting off the Flesh and Blood year with a bang, which we obviously knew what it was happening, but it's kind of wild. It's New Year's Day right now, and in 2 days from now, like a day after this pod drops, I'm playing my first RTN of the year already. So kind of looking forward to that.
I'm here for it.
How's your New Year's? How have you been?
Yeah, it's good. I'm just gonna say I'm here for it. Like I'm ready to play some Flesh and Blood, so I'm really looking forward to playing this weekend. My New Year's was good. Bit of recovery. It's the second for me now. Bit of recovery yesterday. Pretty low key first. Just watched Stranger Things, of course, as half the world was doing yesterday with the finals of the final episode of Stranger Things dropping. And then
I heard about that. A lot of people were telling me, they're like, oh yeah, I'm a part of my plans to watch Stranger Things, and I just pieced together from people telling me this. I was like, oh, there must be some sort of finale or something happening, or something, a new season dropped or something.
The final episode.
I didn't fully know what it is. I see.
Yeah. Watched a movie.
How was it? Was it?
Yeah, it was good. It was good. I think this last season has been, it's been fine. I think the series overall was like a good series. I think. This season, they had a lot of money to work with, and at times I'm like, oh, these episodes are a bit much, bit over the top. But I liked it. I thought it was pretty well done. So I think the finale was mostly good. So yeah. And then other than that, this week in Flesh and Blood, I guess we can turn to. But I've mostly just been trying to get some games in, some reps for testing, working out what I'm going to play. I haven't sleeved up the deck that I'm intending to play, but I'm like 90% of what I'm playing this weekend. I think I'm between 2 options, so we'll talk about that in the main topic of the pod. But today I'm gonna sleeve that up, play some more games.
Real quick on the movie/content thing. I actually did manage to find a friend who had Netflix to watch the new Knives Out.
Oh,
and it was really good.
It's good, right?
I'm still. I think I need to watch it again to really decide whether it's my favorite of the 3, because I know you said it was in your opinion, it's the best of the 3. I enjoyed it. I need to watch it again to know if it's like the best.
I think the best is the first one, but I think it's my favorite of the 3.
I could see that. I could see that being very real. All 3 of them are actually really good though.
They are.
So
the second one is.
I'm probably watching it again soon, and then I'll let you know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could see doing a marathon, to be honest, watching all 3 at some point.
Yeah, more Benoit Blanc. And in terms of Flesh and Blood side, I played an Armory this week to get some paper reps, because the deck I'm bringing, a bit of a spoiler alert, is a bit of a new one for me, and I just want to make sure I have the reps in paper to play it, and I've been testing online with the team as well. And similar to you, I'm like 90% to bring this. There's still a 10% chance I just fall back to like one of the default picks, but I'm feeling fairly confident with this one, at least for the first RTN. I think I'm going to give it a spin.
It's good that when you shift to a deck like Gravy Bones, you got to make sure that you get those in paper reps, that you don't make those mistakes with your gold and things like that. So it's been good you've been testing in paper with your new main hero, Gravy Bones, Pankaj.
Yeah, you probably shocked a whole bunch of the viewers with that, but no, it is not Gravy Bones. Although that being said, actually, on that note, I have been having some intrusive thoughts, and I've been telling some people about this.
Yeah? Careful what you say.
So I've been wanting... I've been missing a little bit of the type of deck that has a lot of intricate play lines and very diverging game plans, and the sort of hero where the micro and the macro are both very detailed and intricate. I've been sort of missing that feel for a little bit. And I was watching, obviously, a whole bunch of coverage, and I realized there is one hero that exists that actually scratches the itch on both those ends. And I was like, oh no, am I actually thinking of potentially learning Prism?
Oh, Prism.
Nah, Prism. I actually think Prism scratches those itches. I think like when I see like Ian Zhang and Kevin Murphy pilot that deck, it just looks so intricate, and it looks very much like they have this huge well of experience that they are leaning on as they make all their micro decision, as they even sat down and decided how many auras are playing this matchup, how many heralds are playing this matchup, how many red heralds, how many blah blah blah. Especially like, when I play against a Verdance or something like that, there is a sort of a mix of a herald and an aura plan, and there's some it's like pure aura, some it's pure herald. When they use the halo and stuff, like sometimes it's obvious, but sometimes it's really not. And somehow I was just having these thoughts like, this hero seems really appealing right now, and I was like, oh no, this is not good for my image, if you will, as an illusionist hater. But yeah, I did ask Kevin Murphy. I was like, would you coach me if I decide? And he said he'd be down. So we'll see.
Come on, man! You can't. I was notoriously someone who didn't like Assassin, and I gave it a shot. They printed a hero that I finally enjoyed, and you got to know when to repent for your hatred of a class. Come on, Pankaj. No, I think what's funny. When hearing you talk though, I was thinking about something, which is you have in this game. I think you have decks that are complicated on two different fronts. You either have a deck that's complicated from a micro standpoint, like you were just talking about, or you have a deck that's complicated from a macro standpoint, where your strategies are quite in depth and you have to be really across what the overall strategy is, and they can still be quite complex strategies. Whereas other decks will be more complicated, not because of the macro strategy. The macro strategy might be very straightforward, kill your opponent with attack actions, but the micro within that can be very intricate. So I do really like that about Flesh and Blood. And to your point, I think there's a lot of macro right now. Like for instance, a deck that I know that you like to play, Verdance, for instance, is very macro. Like the micro is not particularly interesting, I think, but the macro is like really interesting. Some of those matchups can be really complicated in terms of the actual overall strategy, but the micro isn't super complicated. But yeah, Prism is a deck that is built on all the small decisions that happen during the game, and the macro strategies are mostly, there's a couple of more interesting ones, but they're mostly kind of same.
The micro on the Verdant side, yeah, I fully agree with you. It's kind of why I've sort of like moved away from the deck quite a bit. It's just very boring on the micro side of things. It is an easier deck to play than Syndra is, in my opinion. Like actually, Syndra I think is the reverse, where the macro isn't too complicated. The macro is kind of the same every time. Threaten Mask as much as possible and kill them with a Flick Knives endgame. But the micro in Syndra is actually quite intricate. And Verdant's like the opposite, where the micro is, you block with your 2 cards that block 3 in Earth, and then you send your Felling, and it's just, you play your 2 card 7. You don't have too much. Unless you're playing the combo side of it. I do feel like when you're in that configuration, there is a little bit more micro, depending on what your opponent's doing. Like, if they are able to put pressure on you, like they're Florian, and they're putting CMHs on the field, and you're trying to combo them. There's a bit there, but yeah, it's still not a lot. And then Prism feels like she's got both sides of it, and I was like,
A lot of it is still the macro, though, right? Even with that, it's like, I'm playing this combo plan. How do I knack the combo plan? It's so interesting. I think that the 2 decks that I played last year, after Enigma was banned, I would say, and even Enigma I thought was scratch this itch for me, was I played decks that I really enjoyed the micro side of it. So I played Syndra, to your point, and maybe the deck that I've had the most fun from a micro standpoint of the decisions and the ways you get into situations of game states through the micro play, Slippy. Like, honestly, one of my favorite decks in the past 2 or 3 years from a micro. Honestly, as much as you're also going to hate this, probably since Ultim, the deck I've enjoyed the most from a micro standpoint. And I wasn't a big Ultim fan, but I did like the fun iterations of Ultim and the micro strategies. But yeah, anyway.
Slippy did have interesting micro decisions for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, like, talk about a deck that was like offered a lot on both the micro and macro side. It was definitely Icelander, right? I feel like that deck kind of just took the cake on like both ends. You had to know each matchup down to the T, and it like piloted effectively as well. It was amazing. Nu was
come off it.
Like maybe earlier on she like was in that realm, but later on, like once it became you play 90 reacts and you like just fatigue everyone, then it became a lot more boring. That's when I started moving away from that deck as well. But earlier on, when there were some matchups where you actually kept the hero ability, and some matchups where you're maybe playing a slower game, some matchups against Zen, you actually need to like make sure disrupting them every turn. That was a little bit more, but yeah. Nothing scratched the itch since Icelander. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll pick up Prism. We'll see.
To be fair, I think Gravy does have those macro decisions as well. I'm not saying they're at the same extent, but I do think that deck does. I'm struggling with wanting to play Gravy, personally.
Yeah, I definitely agree on the micro side. How much do you think he has on the macro side of things? I guess there are some matchups where they could threaten fatigue and you need to think of that, but it does feel like most of the time it's just on the micro, right?
I think if I thought about matchups we have macro, I think Prism and the Mirror are the two matchups where I think the macro is quite important, but the larger picture of how you're playing that matchup. But yeah, I would mostly agree. Anyway, let's move on. Any news this week, Pankaj? I was sort of scouring, but it's really the shoulder week of the year, and everyone's off. LSS didn't publish anything particularly interesting. There's no real news.
Yep, no news except RTNs are this weekend, so go make it or go register if you haven't. Hayden hadn't registered yet before we got on this call. So
I just did it.
Make sure you're registered because those things fill up.
Yeah, this game's popular. Who would have thought? Let's get on to the Commander Cookout then. And this week we have a question coming from the way of Spotify through the comment section. If you want to get your questions in for the Commander Cookout, please definitely do so. You can drop them in the YouTube comments below. If you're a video watcher, let us know it's a Commander Cookout question, so we make sure to grab it and put it into our file of Commander, or the bag of Commander Cookout questions. You can do what this person has done as well. Get onto the Spotify comment section and leave a comment. You can email us at arsenalpassfab@gmail.com with your question. You can go to the Arsenal Pass Discord if you're a Patreon subscriber. Pop your question in the Commander Cookout section there. Or you can give us a handwritten note. You'll see us at some events very soon. Columbus for you, Pankaj. I'll be in Brisbane. Many events that you'll see us at through the year, of course. We'll both be in Yokohama early this year as well. This question comes from Brett Curtin of Australia. A question for the Commander Cookout. For teams preparing for major events, how do you structure testing? Specifically, how do you evaluate tech choices, adapt decks to an expected meta, and turn internal games into actionable insights when testing can otherwise devolve into repeated play without clear structure or progression? Great question. Very encompassing question.
A big thing is definitely making sure that you are making some sort of change. So say you want to test a specific matchup, like say Mario Gravy, for example, and you want to see if there's a way for the Mario to actually overcome that matchup. Well, you play your first few games, like first 2 to 3 games, sort of in a default configuration, a default strategy, like what you do for most things, and you'd be like, okay, this isn't really working. And then it becomes, okay, can you make a change? Either on the strategy side or on maybe a couple of cards. Maybe let's add in some E-strikes because Chum's a big problem. Or maybe add Gravekeeping if you're going down, that kind of thing. But making one change, or maybe just change your strategy completely. You're still running the same cards, or just the same 80, and you're like, okay, actually let me side in my D-reacts and play a bit more of a slower game, for example. Just making this one change and then playing a couple more games and evaluating how that change feels. That's basically isolating variables, almost like a science experiment, right? And then after you see whether you feel better or worse, depending on that, and then that's how you continue to iterate. I think the challenge, then becomes how do you not get inbred? And Hayden, I know you've definitely had a lot of experience on this side of things, because so in this example that I'm talking about, suppose Mario's internal Mario plays E-strikes, plays Gravekeeping, say, and then now they're fatiguing the Gravies. I'm not saying there's an actual thing. I haven't tested this. I'm just spitballing here. Suppose that happens, and then the Gravies internally are like, oh, okay, if Mario's do this, let me play my Remembrance in and my Humperdinck thing, and then change my strategy to beat that. And now they can beat that, but then they show up at the event and they play against a Mario that's not doing Gravekeeping E-strike stuff, and then they lose because they have Remembrance in their deck. And I think that is a challenge that can be quite difficult to overcome. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that, Hayden.
Oh, that literal exact thing happened. Replaced Mario with Slippy at Pro Tour in Singapore. I played against someone that I know you know very well, and Ian Zhang, in I think the last round of the calling, and Ian had a Humperdinck in his hand against me. I think I pitched it or discarded it, and I was really surprised to see it. But actually 3 other people that I'd played against had done that against me. And from my testing, I knew people were trying to fatigue with Slippy, but I was pretty sure it's terrible. And if your opponent's ever prepared for it, I don't think you can win. So I was very much of the opinion that actually you're just a really good aggro deck and you should just play your best cards. And I was getting a lot of percentage points because people were bringing in like the fatigue package against me. They weren't running a clean 60, so they weren't drawing their best cards all the time. They were playing things like Humperdinck. So that stuff's really true, honestly. And you see it in practice all the time, especially at the pro level, because you're testing with the best players in the world. And so you're like, well, if the best players in my team are doing this, then other best players in the world should be doing this. And if I've learned one thing, I would say that the Pro Tour has evolved now, so this does happen more than it used to. But we had this saying in our team for a long time, and it sounds a little bit, I guess, narcissistic in a way and a little bit douchey in some ways, but it's like, stop respecting the event so much. Stop respecting the people showing up at the event so much, because what it didn't mean, people are bad. You should just, people are bad. That's not what it was saying. Basically what we're saying is that the testing gets so in depth that what you know is not the same as what others know, because you're so focused on the deck you're playing. This especially was true when you were playing maybe not one of the top 3 decks, because you got to step back and say, well, actually, how much time we've put in 20, 30, 40 hours into like these specific matchups across everyone playing this matchup. Have other people, if it's not one of the top 3 decks? No, probably not. So are they arriving at the same conclusions? Almost certainly not. So that inbred testing can actually be really damaging for how you show up in an event. For me, it's about escalation of testing. It's about starting wide and getting to a narrow point in your testing, because you start wide to learn as much as possible. You cast your net wide. You spread the time pretty thinly. You don't go too in depth on some things. You're trying to learn a lot of macro. You're trying to learn a lot of macro things about the format. And then as you start to narrow down into the decks that are the meta, or the decks that you should play, or the decks that have a good, you want to play, then you should start getting more narrow. But as you get more narrow, you have to be very targeted in your testing, to your point, Pankaj, right? Like you have to have really clear intentions with the testing structure. So it might be like, okay, we've got 4 weeks to an event. The first week, it's all macro. We're testing these 10 decks into different into other heroes, or within those 10 heroes, and learning what does the matchup spread across those 10 heroes look like. Okay, now we get to week 2. We've found that, we've confirmed what we thought. There's 2 decks that are the 2 best decks in the format, but actually there's 1 or 2 other decks that are sitting on the fringe that we think are playable. Now let's focus on these 4 decks in our testing. So the second week you might focus on playing, those 2 fringe decks against the top 3-4 decks to learn how strong they really are, especially once you start to adapt. And then the third week might be, okay, now we've landed on the 1 or 2 decks we want to play. Now we're testing specific things, specific cards. Like you said, Pankaj, that's when you start to go, okay, I'm changing this 1 or 2 things. I'm changing this 1 or 2 thing. I'm changing my approach here for this matchup. Hey, opponent, don't change your approach, because we don't want to get inbred. Stay with what we think is the default plan in this matchup. Okay, we've tested that. Now let's test a different plan just to see if the matchup is still good. So you go down that path, but you stay very specific about trying to keep the testing very impartial, right? So you don't get too focused on the specifics of your inbred testing. And then you come down the last week, again, might be very small, minute things that you're testing and just learning reps, interactions, the micro, right? You're really learning the micro. But within that, you have to be so structured with your testing. You have to be very clear of what your intentions are and what you're trying to find out. You don't just play a game for the sake of playing a game. You should never, in a good testing environment, the best teams don't just sit down and say, oh, we're just going to play Marionette versus Gravy for no reason. There will always be a reason. Okay, we're going to play Marionette versus Gravy. On that week 1, it's because we want to understand generally who's favored at a macro level. Week 4, it's going to be, we're playing Mario versus Gravy because we want to test this specific card for the matchup, or this very niche strategy. Or actually, what if we do try and fatigue them? What happens there? So yeah, for me, it's about the escalation of testing and how you narrow down through the weeks, and you have to be very, very structured and make sure that, Brett asked about actionable insights. Every insight needs to be actionable. You need to have a plan on every single game that you play and why you're playing that game.
Mm-hmm. I mean, some of the insights might be, you know what, this card didn't actually do what I wanted it to.
Yeah, get it out.
Like if you were like running Gravekeeping into Gravy, right? Then your actionable insight is, okay, yeah, no, this card didn't do anything. Or like, it didn't like work with everything else that I'm doing, or it was just awkward in a lot of these spots, and I didn't actually like it. That could be an actionable insight in that you like tried it and then you're like, okay, this isn't it. But maybe an actual insight is, yeah, you tried E-Strike and you're like, wait, this actually felt amazing, because then now I could play the Chum a little bit more profitably, kind of thing. I want to add on a little bit to your point about not respecting the event too much. I think that is so real. Part of it is that, okay, the average Pro Tour, we have like 400, 450 players, like 400 players, right? And I think especially like as content creators and maybe in the higher level like testing sphere as well, you can sometimes fall into like an echo chamber
100%.
in a sense, where you are thinking like of yourself as like, you know, you in this pro team with all these other pro tour top 8 people and everything, testing with them, and then you're thinking of these other players as well, but you're also thinking of the other named players, but you're forgetting that there's like about 350 other players at this event who kind of aren't, to your point, testing the matchup as extensively as you are. There is a whole bunch of people at like these tier 4 events even who kind of just like played their pro quest, got there, and are just showing up to the event because they could, but they're not like preparing to the same level. That number of people who are actually preparing to like that highest level isn't actually that much, I think, compared to the size of the event. Yeah, and then of the people who are testing that much, how many of them are going to be on that hero?
Exactly, that's
that
the
you
point.
are like that specific hero too, right? So it ends up being like, okay, the number of gravies you're going to play against who have prepared against your like Fatigue Mario or whatever is actually a lot smaller than you think it is. Because you're like forgetting that is going through all this testing and this like sort of like chamber thing, and then you try and fatigue a normal middle of the road gravy, and then you just lose because they just played normal into you and didn't bring in remembrance, and you're like, damn it.
I would say the biggest downfall. So we've just spoken at a very high level, but if I step down to maybe good players, so tier 3, I'm talking people who can day 2 calling, people who can maybe they've cashed a pro tour before, right? I think at this level, a big downfall I see of these players is they overcomplicate things. They spend too much time on the wrong things. So instead of just playing a really strong deck and being really clear on the strategies and having repeatable macro strategies and being really good at the micro on this particular hero, they all of a sudden decide they need to play in this very atypical way against a matchup to get the edge. And often what I see is someone doing this, and I watch them sit down. They'll sit down against me, and they're like, I have this, they start enacting this strategy against me. And it's just a bad strategy. Like, I can see what they're trying to do. It's a bit atypical. Maybe they're trying to, I'm not going to attack into you. You're a deck that plays defense reactions. I'm not going to attack into you. I'm going to try and set up only 5-card hands. Okay, that could be a really good strategy. But their deck's not set up to do it. They're playing a deck that doesn't efficiently use 5-card hands. So all of a sudden, and then the meanwhile, like say that I don't want to let this, previously with Rubone Carapace, I don't want to let this Verdance decompose and turn on their hero ability. That's fine, but I'm just going to sit there and chip away at your health because you're only playing AB2 or AB3. So you're just going to let me cycle to my trees and things like that. And I'll just keep over pitching into my tree to keep it around. And this is genuinely a strategy that I saw like quite a decent player do into me. And I think had they just played their deck and played the straightforward approach, they would have had a much better chance of winning. And also they wouldn't have spent time. They probably spent a couple of hours testing and trying this strategy on Talishar or whatever. It's like that could have been 2 or 3 hours better spent just refining play or maybe even testing another deck or something like that. So I think a downfall I see of that like mid-tier player or players that are aspiring grinders or, want to, maybe the next step is cracking a calling top 8 or cracking a top 32 at PT or something, or a top 64 at PT. I feel like one of the biggest downfalls I see is people just spending the wrong time on the wrong things, not using their testing time efficiently and not just playing good strategies.
Mm-hmm. I want to add on a little bit to your point about like just testing on Talishar. I do feel like it's pretty low EV, I feel like, when you just like spend hours in Talishar because of exactly what we were talking about, right? When you are doing structured testing, when you're doing intentional testing, you want to isolate these variables, and when you're just playing against like randos on Talishar, you don't actually get to do that. So firstly, the skill level of an opponent varies so much on Talishar. A number of times I play against an opponent and then they like block with their armor on turn 0, and I'm just like, okay, this whole game is like, I feel like I'm not learning anything because I'm not playing against
and they're not
someone
playing
who's
KO underhanded cheat.
Yeah, and then there's other times I'm just like, okay, I want to try like this specific strategy into like a Florin, for example. And then the Florin I'm playing against is like they're trying a new strategy themselves too, and then I'm not getting the isolated variable testing that I really want. Like they're playing like Pummel for Florin for some reason. I don't know. I'm just making things up. And because they're like, maybe that's how they think they can beat Verdance. And I'm just kind of like, okay, I'm trying to isolate my strategy where I play like Waning Moon instead of Aethertide or something, but then I'm playing against like a Pummel Florin, and this just feels like chaotic and not structured at all. Whereas when you play against someone who you can ask them to like do the certain thing or just play like default, and then you can test your thing to see whether it actually works. Yeah. I do think that's a big part of it as well. I definitely agree with you on like just rando Talishar grinding to me feels just not the most productive.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's your only option for a lot of players, but I would really recommend just finding some locals that are, halfway decent and put them in the specific role. So you're like, okay, maybe they're not going to go to the Pro Tour, or I'm trying to go to the Pro Tour and they're not. But, I like them. They're great to have around. They're decent at the game. They're good at playing the decks that they know how to play. Give them a specific task. Say, hey, you're a Prism player. I want you to play Prism, and I want you to just play like the default kind of way of Prism into this matchup. And I just need those reps, because to your Pankaj's point, you've controlled your variable, and you don't waste time by being like, oh, hopefully this one I pair into now doesn't do something weird, because you just ask them, hey, can you just play? I'd love to play a 5-game set against you, where you play in this way that I believe most Prisms play into this matchup, which is, okay, just play the hero plan. We don't think auras is good in this matchup. We don't want to test auras. Can you just play the hero plan into me five games in a row? Or, I'm playing against Verdance, and I don't think people are going to be on the combo package. Can you just play a non-combo Verdance deck into me 5 games in a row?
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
And it'll be like, okay, wait, what if they do run the combo package? It's like, okay, let me see how effective like Summer's Fall and Channel the Tranquil Domain is. 100%. And we've actually, I think I have a very real example I can bring up where we had this isolated testing thing, and we're like, okay, it was internally, I think it was, we're playing against Barrett, right? A very good Prism. It was either Barrett or Ian Zhang is one of them, and like Margin was playing into him, and we're like, okay, if the Prism plays auras, which they want to do into Verdance, can Verdance even tech for it? And then we found out that just like one Channel Tranquil Domain, like one Summer's Fall, like isn't enough. We found out that Verdance need to add like 4 or 5 of these aura hate cards before it's like even, like not even like favored, or maybe like slightly favored for Verdance. And we're like, we just don't have space for this. And then your actionable insight from that is you either sack Prism or you change deck, kind of thing. Or you sack the mirror if you want to add in the Prism hate. But now you have an idea of what you need to actually overcome this matchup, because you've controlled the variable at least on one end. Like, we didn't be like, okay, now Prism, you adapt to us playing the aura hate cards. Like, no, just you stick to that. Now we know how we can beat it like a regular Prism doing this aura thing. And we can see whether we can tailor the deck to actually fit that, or make a decision based on that.
I'll always make a list of the things I want to test. So let's say we're in the final 2 weeks, or maybe I'm between 2 decks. So maybe it's like, I might play Prism or I might play Marionette. Prism, these are the 5 things I need to understand to help me make a decision. I need to understand the general macro matchup against Gravy, let's say. I need to understand against Marionette what happens if I play these cards versus if I don't play these cards. I want to test the specific card. And third on my list, so forth down. Now I'm making a list for Marionette. I'll do the same thing. What are the things I want to test? I'll always start with the things that are going to have the biggest impact, and down to the things that are going to have the lowest impact, and try and test in that order, because you only have so much time, right? So a specific card, for instance, and what that might do to change 1 or 2% of a matchup is going to be very low down on my list versus just the macro of understanding that matchup and how it's meant to play out. So I really do recommend having set specific testing and keeping like lists, honestly, of like what you want to test. So you can be like, even if you're in a group, sometimes we'll have me on a Discord and be like, hey, I'm really looking to test against Yal fatiguing me. Is anyone comfortable with running that? And can you play 3 or 4 games against me? Yeah, cool. Done. Play my 3 or 4 games, tick it off the list, move on.
Also, sort of in terms of group etiquette sort of thing, make sure you also
I know what you
have those moments where you're on the other side giving people the reps that they want. If someone's like, I really want to play in like Kasai, for example, and I'm like not really looking at Kasai, but like, yeah, okay, I'll show up and like play a Kasai rep into them, because you do want to make sure you're on both sides of it, right? Not just asking people to give you reps into something specific, but you're also providing the reps on like when they ask you for them.
Yeah, but also don't be that guy who is like, oh, I want to test this rogue deck. I need people to play 20 games into me on this rogue deck. It's like you're not benefiting anyone else, because no one else is probably considering playing their deck. So just be aware of being that person, by the way.
Yeah, that honestly hurts me in the soul a little bit,
It's
especially
true,
when I was like doing like all the Marlin testing. I was like, brother, I felt I was wasting everyone's time. I don't know. We came close, but when it didn't pan out, I was like, damn, we kind of did spend all these hours on Marlin, didn't we?
I've also been that guy before. It's fine. You just gotta have maybe like one person who's gonna help you with that, as opposed to taking away a lot of the team's time.
You kind of do need a balance, though, I do feel like, because sometimes you do sort of find something like interesting, right? Like Ellie, for example, found like Phi Syndra, like with the I forget the chess piece, but with the one on Chainlink 5, it like blocks +4. It's basically Karen Husk against like a lava burst, kind of basically turns out a lava burst. Well, whatever. But that was an interesting a piece of information that we got regarding the matchup, because someone is willing to go experiment and go brew. So I think there is some value in that. But yeah, you can't just have everyone being like a mad scientist. You kind of just need like a few people in the team doing that, and everyone else is doing proper structured testing stuff.
You have to know when to hop off as well. Get off the train.
True. Yep.
All right. Great question there from Brett. If you want to get your questions in for Commander Cookout, please do so through all or any of the methods that we listed earlier. With that said, Pankaj, it is time to get on to the main topic of the pod. What should you play for Road to National season? And I want to start by taking stock of what metagame are we walking into. This metagame is set to be very wide. We spoke about it previous week when we spoke through the Hong Kong meta, when we also spoke about just an update on the ban and restricted as well, that we felt that heading into Road to National season, this meta was poised to be very wide. There's a lot of playable decks, and I don't think that's changed. And if we look at, we spoke about this last week briefly, so we don't have to get too deep into this, but if you look at the Hong Kong meta from the calling, which is the last sort of point of reference post-ban that we have going into Road to Nationals, KO, Gravy, Kasai, Arachne, Marionette, Verdance, those are your top 5 decks in terms of playability. But apart from KO and Gravy being pretty well repped, it was all really close after that, all the way down to the fact of Syndra's, Dash.IOs, Acilios of the world. So I think it just shows that it is going to be very widespread. I wouldn't be surprised if this has the most flat winning distribution of heroes this Road to National season. Of course, this is early on. Things can change. The format can narrow as we get into weeks 3 and 4. But personally, Pankaj, I'm just not seeing it. I think this is going to be a very wide meta.
I agree with that too, but I do want to provide a bit more context with regarding looking at specifically calling Hong Kong results. Was that this was literally the weekend after the bans, right? Like we heard about the bans on Monday, and then that weekend, very Saturday, true, it was when calling Hong Kong happened. And I do feel like perhaps there wasn't, like, this isn't as refined of a metagame. And we've seen this in the past before. Every time early in the new metagame, it always looks wide. It always looks like there's so many heroes you can play. Like, remember at the start of the previous ProQuest season, we were like, oh, there's 5 top decks. And then as we went more and more into it, where like KO's actually falling off. And then I felt there was another 4th deck which also fell off, and suddenly it became Gravy, Verdance, and Syndra. And then there were moments where we were like, wait, is it actually just a 2-deck format, right? So I just want to take the Hong Kong results with a bit of a grain of salt, given how early it is in a fresh metagame. But overall, it does seem like we're not too far off the metagame we just came from before the bans.
Yep. So. Yeah. I think the mid is always going to narrow to some extent, and there's a great example of this, I think, in terms of when we talk about decks of one that I just think is it's overperforming. Well, I don't even know if it's overperforming, but it's overperforming. It's being overrepresented right now, I would say, which we'll talk about. What do you think week 1 the metagame is going to look like? Maybe we can say top 5 most played decks, and do you think 1 or 2 of these will have more representation than the others?
I think the top 5 from calling Hong Kong makes sense for like the first week of RTN. I think I'm going to guess the hero you were referring to when you said a hero that's potentially being overrepresented. Was it KO by any chance?
100%.
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, because that's my take too. It's like KO's most represented at Hong Kong. And I think that's part of why I had that preamble of wanting to take this with a grain of salt. I don't think KO is strong enough to be a most represented deck right now. Like, I'm not sure if I would recommend someone bring KO.
I wouldn't.
To their RTN even. But I do expect it to be most rep for like the first week because people are still figuring it out. And I think KO was the first hero people looked at as like the de facto aggro deck. Now that Syndra got pretty substantially nerfed. So people are like just sort of defaulting to KO. But I would be surprised if he maintains that spot of most represented.
Yeah, I think you've got to take a step back and say, what happened during the bans? Well, KO it's one of its best matchups in the form of Syndra got nerfed. So I think, you've got to also look at what happens out of that ban and restricted, not just what replaces a deck sort of thing.
You think KO was favored into Syndra?
100%. I think it was one of the reasons that you play KO. I don't think it was massively favored, but I think it was one of KO's best matchups because KO didn't have that many good matchups. But I think your Syndra matchup was one of the reasons to play KO.
I actually think I thought Syndra going away was better for KO because I thought Syndra actually beat KO. So interesting. We have differing testing results there.
Yeah, definitely something that I spent some time testing because I was like, oh, actually, maybe KO. Never mind. It's got. I was like, oh, like a matchup, and then played other things. And anyway, I think
we don't think KO is like very strong in the current meta, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, I think because neither of us are going to talk about this. I think in terms of our recommendations, it seems like. I think your Gravy matchup, you're unfavored. I think the Kasai matchup, you're slightly unfavored to unfavored. It's gotten better than it has been previously, I think.
Strongest Survive did a lot for the matchup for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
The 9 of Strongest Survives, like, ooh, that's quite annoying for Kasai to deal with.
I don't think Marionette is a good matchup for you.
Marionette's not. Verdant's not a good matchup either.
So what are you beating?
Like
Acilio?
Like a potentially Kasai. Like potentially like Kasai. It's like fine. It's like close to even. And then Acilio, yes, you do beat Acilio.
Prism, obviously, as well. But we don't think Prism is going to show up massively more than it was in the last meta for week 1 at least. But I actually think Prism could be a grow into because I think Prism is a decently positioned deck in this format.
I agree. Prism maybe reminds me a little bit of like Arachne Marinette in like the previous format, where it took a while for people to realize, wait, this hero is actually very, very legit.
Yeah.
I could see that being a spell. But at the same, Prism does have the problem, unlike Marinette, where if people decide to respect you, it does get a lot harder for you.
So I think you spoke about... So you're saying KO, Gravy, Kasai, Marionette, Verdant's probably safe-ish to say top 5 representation this weekend, or thereabouts.
Yes.
I think the one for me is I think Verdant's is dropping off a bit, which is interesting to say because it just won the calling. But I think KO is going to maintain good representation this weekend. I think so is Gravy. And then I think Marionette is growing, I would say, and same with Kasai a little bit. I also think Dash.io is gaining popularity, and I think it should because it's well positioned. So I think if we don't get representation data, right, we'll get results, not representation data. But I think I wouldn't be surprised if Dash.io is quite well represented this week and was one of the top 5 most played decks for week 1 of Road to National season, over even Verdant's at this point.
I could see Acilio in that spot, actually. I think Acilio is like a dark horse that I'm looking at. But Verdant's is so confusing. Like we've been saying this for months. Even like the Gravy Syndra metagame. We're like, wait, she doesn't really beat Gravy. She doesn't really beat Syndra either. So like, why people playing Verdant's? Why is she like winning all this stuff? And I feel similarly looking at these top, like the current top heroes. Well, Gravy is still there. Marinette is like a coin flip now that they've added Codex of Inertias and are like very dagger react tricky. And you can't always play into T-Talks, it feels like, when you're on Verdant. So that matchup isn't, like, positive for you either. And Acilio is, like, really bad for you. So I'm kind of just, like, again, like, I agree with you where, in theory, Verdant should fall off. But we've just seen her just be resilient through and through in the past, where I'm starting to doubt that statement.
No, I'm pretty confident that I think people like Dash.io is gaining in popularity. I think so is Acilio to a point as well. I actually think there's a bit of a gap. I think there's like 4 decks in terms of representation. I think KO, Gravy Bones, Kasai, and Arachne are kind of like the 4 in a group, and then I think after that it's like Verdant's, Dash.io, Acilio, Syndra, and Prism. I think are like the next group of heroes that will see representation, and I think after that. Maybe Florian is even in that group as well, potentially. And then it just sort of drops off to stragglers of playables after that. Your Dorinthias, your underhanded cheats, things like that.
So what's so interesting is that in your first band and second band of heroes that you were mentioning, like, who does Verdant want to play against? She wants to play against KO. Like, everything else, I guess Dash.io maybe a little bit. And then, like, the rest of it, she's kind of just like, doesn't... Oh, yeah, Kasai, yes. That's a big one. But does
KO
like,
and Kasai.
Even in, like, the tier 2... Like even in the second band where you have like the Prisms and Acilios running around, like Verdant doesn't even want to play into those either. Yeah. So the hero is quite confusing.
Wait, Prism, sorry, or
in terms of like you don't want to play against Prism.
Oh, sure, yeah. I agree. Yeah, I think Verdant's. You know, if you look at those top 4 though, KO, yes. Gravy Bones, no. Kasai, yes. Arachne, like you say, coin flip. Like I don't think that's a terrible place to be for Road to Nationals, especially then when you're good into Dash.io. You're good into Dorinthia. Like I think, you know, that like a lot of those other hit Florians, Iras, Guardians of the World, like you have a lot of like fringe matchups that are good. So I do think Verdant's is still a good Road to Nationals pick. I just think it's starting to drop off a little bit.
Fair.
Anything else
where you at on Kasai? Yes, because I know you're like a Kasai hater. So like, where you at on that?
I'm not a Kasai hater. I just think it's I think it's fine. What I would say, and this will preamble the decks I speak about, is any deck that and I've said this multiple times over the last few weeks, I think any deck you want to play for this Road to National season, because of how wide this meta is going to be and because of how wide local metas tend to be as well, especially at a tier 2 and even tier 3 level, you want to play a deck that is just inherently raw power. I do think Kasai sits in the lower end of that band. I think my problem with Kasai is you have some matchups that just feel completely out of your hands, honestly. And feel about like how you draw in the first few turns, whether you see like yellow and reds in a good mix together so that you can threaten your hero ability early. I think the KO matchup, I think KO's gonna be really well represented. I don't think is that amazing. I think the Marionette matchup, I think it's Marionette favored, right?
I think so too.
So I'm just kind of, and I also don't think the Gravy matchup is like that fantastic. I do think it's good for you, but I don't think it's like phenomenal.
I think it's pretty good. Like I would put it in the I want to see Gravies as Kasai.
Yeah, okay. So you want to see one deck of like, if we're talking Verdant's Marionette, Gravy Bones, KO, you want to play Gravy Bones.
And Gravy Bones, and then KO would be second because like that's kind of coin flippy. But then yes.
But even if
Marionette and Verdance,
you were smacking down Verdance before, right, and saying, "Oh, a coin flippy with Marionette," but actually you want to play against KO and Kasai, right? So you had 2 decks before you even got to a coin flip with Marionette. So I'm really struggling with Kasai a little bit, but we can talk about it.
That's fair
as we get into it. Is there anything else you want to talk from meta representation or where this meta game stands right now? Is there anything you've got your eye on so I said I thought Verdance was going to drop off and Dash.io is going to climb potentially this weekend. Any of those other decks you think might break into the top 4, top 5, or vice versa, might drop out?
Yeah, so KO, I think it will be falling off. I don't think he's going to remain in the top 5. I think I'm going to say, I mean, we sort of have been skirting around this, but we haven't like addressed it directly. We've sort of just been like, we started with the premise that Gravy is going to be very well represented and very strong, and I'm just going to like actually direct attention to that and be like, yes, this is consciously acknowledged. I think Gravy is one of the best decks. Was affected like the least from the bans, and I think it's very reasonable for you to want to play a deck that has a solid game plan into Gravy, because I think he looks to be very, very strong. He did lose his biggest predator, right, from a previous meta, which was Syndra. And as we spoke about, like the replacement so far, which seems to be KO, isn't actually that good against him. So I think his position is pretty
strong. What do you think? Let's get into them. What's the best deck in the format, or what are the 2 or 3 best decks in the format then?
I'd start with Gravy. I think it's a little bit of like the linchpin of the format in some sense, but he's going to be there, and you should have an answer for allies, and that's kind of why I'm fairly decently high on Kasai. I think her Gravy Bones matchup is very good. Gravy is the one, and then it's like if people want to play Verdance and some people want to play KO and everything, and Marionette, Gravy's just beating all of those decks.
Yeah, I think Gravy and Marionette are the 2 best decks right now, heading into week 1 of our international season. I think all the things you just said about Gravy are very true, and I think Marionette is very powerful. I think it's surprised that the ban and it's not that it didn't do anything, it did, but it's the consistency is definitely less now for Marionette to an extent, and it forces you to set your equipment up more specifically, I would say. But I still think it's really, really good. But people can tech more into Marionette. That is true.
Yeah, Gravy and Mario. If you ask me my next best deck, or like the next like solid recommendation I would give, it would be Mario. Which is funny, given like Gravy was number 1 and Mario is bad into Gravy. But I feel like the 2 of them have a little bit of a, like they're sort of protecting each other in like a weird way, sort of thing, where it's like they're both good into the other's like bad matchups. Like Gravy is not very good into like the Acilio or any like aggro deck, but Marionette is. And then Marionette's not very good into like an Earth deck, for example. Like if someone brings like a Florian or something, but then Gravy is good into it. It's sort of like we saw this happen in the previous metagame a little bit, where Syndra didn't really have a predator because Verdance and Gravy were just eating the predators.
Yeah,
like eating Syndra's predators until people discovered Marionette's actually was playable. And I feel like a little bit of that's happening between Gravy and Mario. I do agree with you. Like, we both came up with our 3 heroes to recommend to people, and for both of us, the top 2 were Gravy and Mario.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What about the third best deck? What's the third best deck in the format right now, do you think?
I would put Kasai up there. I agree with you that Verdance's stonks to me are a little bit lower, and I like Kasai because like you're unfavored into Mario. I do think so, but you get to play the game. It's not like a 30%er, it's like a 40%er, I think. But then you have a much better Gravy matchup. Like I think a Gravy matchup is better than 60, so you sort of make up for that.
Wow, really?
In the Gravy against Gravy. Yeah, I mean, Blood Follows Blade is just so strong.
The card is really
against
good.
Gravy. Yeah, because I mean, it's when Blood Follows Blade hits, and because you can attack an ally with it, you are guaranteed that it hits. The value on the card is insane, right? Even if like you get an extra 3 attack with a resource, and it soaks up 2 life, but Gravy has a tough time dealing with a 2 health ally. Like, you have more modular sword sings off of cards like Slice and Dice, off of Braveforge Braces, etc., where you can sort of relatively efficiently clear some allies. Something like Rigor Mortis, you're still minimum going to be sending 2 into it, for example. But you can, for example, craft your turn in a way where you send exactly 6 at Chum, or 7 if you want to play around Fearless, for example. You can send exactly 3 at Sawbones, etc. And Gravy doesn't have the same luxury against your allies. It's quite difficult for them to send 2 without the like yellow and red tipples anymore. So I do like her matchup in Gravy for that reason, and I think it's worth like a little bit negative like Mario matchup.
I think it's Verdance. I think Verdance is the best deck in the format, but
the third best deck, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I could see it.
Should we give our recommendations? I mean, you already spoke about 2 of them. So we both have Gravy and Marionette. I think pretty clear we both think they're the 2 best decks in the format. Do you want to just say anything else around why you think these are good decks for people to play for this weekend? Maybe we can start with Gravy. We can each kind of share why we think it might just be good to play Gravy.
Raw power level,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I'm not sure if there's anything specific to be said here except what everyone already knows about that deck. Just the board stays difficult for many decks to deal with. I think the biggest change is that he just lost his biggest predator in Syndra. So he just immediately like got a big bump from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I also think the other piece is that we think Marionette is the second best deck in the format. At one point this week, I was even thinking it might be the best deck in the format, but I think Gravy Bones is just inherently so strong. And but having a matchup against the second best deck in the format as the best deck, I think is a really good place to be. I think people are going to play a lot of Marionette this weekend. I think you still have a really good game against random non-aggressive decks, so people showing up with like Guardians or things like that. I mean, what you really don't want to be playing against is decks that are still... You think Acilio is going to grow in representation. I agree, but I don't know if this weekend a lot of Acilios are going to show up. That might be depending on your local meta, of course. I actually think in my meta I'm going to see a decent number of Acilios, to be honest. But I think Gravy's just in a really strong position against a lot of the 5, 6, 7 most represented decks that you're likely to see at Road to National season. So I think it's a combination of raw power and matchup spread for me.
As we discuss this, I almost wonder if I want to change my third best deck from Kasai to Prism. Actually,
Prism.
Like, I think the reason why I sort of was discounting Prism a little bit, or didn't want to put her on the list, was because KO is still currently highly represented. He's not fallen off yet. But once he does, I'm like, Prism's going to Gravy. Prism's good into Marinette. You play the game into Kasai. You're good into Verdance. So
interesting.
What are you scared of? Against Prism's scared of exactly KO. And then if KO falls off, which I project him to, like maybe she's not a good pick for this weekend, but I think maybe 3 weeks from now we're gonna be like, wait, why aren't people just playing Prism?
But personally, like from my experience of playing Prism, I don't think Prism is actually very good into... Well, okay, so it depends. It depends what people are playing. So if Marionettes and Kasai's just aren't playing any poppers, then yeah, I think you are good into those matchups. I think you're like... I actually think Kasai, even if they don't have poppers, you're like a 55 into them maybe. Like I think just with boots and everything like that, like it's actually not that good a matchup for you. I don't think Gravy's a good matchup. I think that matchup is... Unless something is changed with this recent ban, I think that matchup was close, slightly Gravy favored. Marionette, I do think it depends on what they play against you for sure. But I think even at best, you're still only getting to like a 60% at best, and then KO's bad for you. So I don't know. I'm struggling to get around Prism, I think.
Okay, good into Verdance though.
We can massively agree there. Definitely good into Verdance.
Yes. All right.
Marionette, do you want to talk about why to bring... Oh, the last thing on Gravy, I would say, is that maybe why you don't want to bring Gravy. I still think you need to understand how to play Gravy Bones. It's still not an easy deck to play. On the flip side, Marionette, I think, is a somewhat easier deck to get a handle on. Some of the macro strategy with your Graphene is a lot easier to... Once you've played a few games, you can understand it. I think getting into like the 90% of that deck is hard. But I think you can play Marionette fairly efficiently after... Especially if you're just a good value player, like you understand good value, you'll pick up the deck pretty quickly. And I do think it's the second best deck in the format. I think it's got raw power. Again, I think you've got a good matchup spread with Marionette.
I agree with you on the sort of the micro decision making from Mario. At first, I think it can be a little bit overwhelming, like the dagger management. But yeah, to your point, once you get a few reps into it, it starts to get a little bit more intuitive and a little bit more straightforward. I think partly because the current builds of Marinette have a lot of 2 blocks, and so to your point, when you're just like a good value player, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna play my 0 for 4 blocks instead of block with and so block with it because it blocks too. The dagger management like can be a little bit tricky at the beginning, but yeah, it's you can pick that up. To me, Marinette is almost like a little bit like the aggro deck of the format right now, in that they have very good numbers on offense. Cards like Savor Bloodshed let them push even higher, and then like Codex of Frailty as well, and Codex of Inertia as well, which just let them get that card advantage that you expect from an aggro deck while they're killing you. But then they also have a little bit of disruption, right? Less compared to maybe like previous Assassins, like Slippy and New, but still there, you still have like your Codex Leaves, and then you still have like Mark of the Black Widow, right? That's kind of the only disruption they have, but it's enough, and coupled with their like solid numbers and card advantage from their books and Savor Bloodshed, I'm getting the vibe from Mario as like the aggro deck of the format right now. The problem is, as an aggro deck, but the aggro deck that actually doesn't beat the Illusionist. Like, doesn't beat the board state decks, which is a unique position for an aggro deck to be in. Usually the aggro deck is like good into Gravy and like fine into Prism, but Mario is not very good into those, but does have a decent matchup into Earth, for example, particularly because of the Codex of Inertia tech. I think that was like, been present in the past 2 months, I think. But yeah, numbers are good. Oh, it's also very tricky. I think a huge advantage for Mario is just it's so the many turn cycles are almost reminiscent of Slippy, where there just isn't really
can't play around stuff.
How to block.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's so many heroes that are just like, I just have to play into T-Tox now, and then you play into T-Tox and you get blown up by T-Tox, and then that's terrible. Like Kissadead is like virtually unblockable, so they've got evasion sort of inbuilt as well because of the reacts and stuff like T-Tox, and then the good numbers as we were talking about. So yeah, raw power level Mario's right up there.
Yeah. The way they leverage codexes, I think, is just... So one of the things I don't like about Marionette, you spoke about it actually, is just the number of 2 blocks. It's not particularly enticing for me to want to play that hero with so many 2 blocks, but I think the way that you leverage what those 2 blocks are is better than almost any other deck that's deciding to run 2 blocks right now. So if you look down, right, it's like Kasai's, even KO's now, don't play a lot of like no and 2 blocks, but the ones that they do, well, mostly KO because Kasai doesn't play any, but KO's 0 and 2 blocks, they're not as powerful as what Marionette's doing with their 2 blocks, I think, for instance. So yeah, I just think that you're right. It's just a lot of good raw power in that deck, but it is a bit susceptible, and you don't beat Gravy. So those are the reasons I think not to play it if you expect a lot of Gravy bones in your meta. You also have to make some not easy sideboarding decisions, I think, in terms of like what you want to put in your sideboard, because if you're like, okay, is there going to be Prisms in my meta? Is there going to be Acilios in my meta? Am I going to face Dash IOs? Like, I do think you need to make some decisions on the decks, the cards that you put into your sideboard. Verdance as well.
Yeah. For sort of maybe being an aggro deck of the format, if you agree with that label, I suppose, their sideboarding is a lot less straightforward than something like, Syndra, for example, or even KO, to your point. I think there's also the whole traps as well. Like, which traps do you want and like how many do you want? I think into Gravy, they're like, if you're playing the aggro plan to Gravy, they're just like, I'm just going to try and get away with just one trap and just hope that I just don't flip into a trapdoor, or if I do have that one, I don't like draw that trap early kind of thing. And there's other, like, into Earth, you're like, I want at least 2 inertia traps sort of thing. So there's like that element of it on top of all the other deck building stuff that you were talking about.
Yep. Okay, well, we've spoken about the 2 obvious ones that we think are the top 2 decks in the format. What's your third recommendation for those players looking for Road to Net? We actually have 4, by the way. We don't have 3. It was our 3 picks, but we each have a 4th pick, which is a bit more of a rogue pick, outside the box pick maybe. But what's your number 3?
And I think for each of us, our 4th pick is what we ourselves are bringing, right? So, do as we say, not as we do, or something, or whatever that is.
Yeah, I'm between my 3rd and 4th. And there's a slight chance I might just play Gravy Bones, because I do still think it's just really good.
Yeah. So my 3rd is Kasai. I think partly because I think finding a deck that's good into Gravy Bones is tough right now. It's not. Yeah, there's just not a lot of that going on right now with Syndra missing. And I think Kasai is probably one of the better heroes in the small band of heroes that are good into Gravy. Like, we have like your Dash IO that's decent to Gravy, and you have like a Scylla decent to Gravy, but they're a little bit more fragile, and I feel like their matchups into the rest of the field is perhaps a little bit questionable. Like Acilio is like quite targetable, it feels like. Where a few points of interaction and Amulet of Echoes, right? I think a lot of people are attacking Amulet of Echoes right now, which is making things tough for Acilio, on top of the inherent fragility of that deck. And then Dash.io has always had the inherent can get fatigued by many decks, so if they can just side in all their 3 blocks, and if they have decent armor. So, like, those decks have that sort of weaknesses, and Kasai to me seems the most robust of the heroes that are going to Gravy, which is why she's there for me. Just difficult to find a deck that's going to Gravy that's also just like solid and decent.
Yep.
It's nothing too special here on the Kasai side, but I think good into Gravy is a big draw to me.
My number 3 is also a deck that is good into Gravy. You mentioned it, Dash.io. I think Dash.io, again, we're talking about raw power. If I want to play a deck in this Road to National season, good into a wide field, has raw power. I think Verdance is dropping off a little bit, at least for this first week. Will that happen overall? I don't know. But I do think that, you know, even some of the other matchups like Marionette, for like, what do you think of the Dash.io Marionette? Like, from what I've seen, the matchup's pretty close.
I think so as well. Yeah, I'll put it in the close because, again, it just comes back to Marionette not really having a lot of disruption.
Yeah.
And Dash.io having a massive fridge. So it's like the turn where they do have their disruption, when they send the leave or whatever, Dash.io is just like, all right, here's my fridge.
Yeah.
I send Mark to Blackwood and like, okay, cool, here's the fridge. So then it does many of those games feel like both players are racing against each other, and Dash.io has armor and is one of the best decks to race with. So yeah, I'm with you. It does feel like very flippy, and I can't say for certain one is favored into the other, unless the Mario is able to sideboard in a way where they bring in all their 3 blocks and they commit to fatiguing Dash.io, and Dash.io is not ready for it.
Yeah.
Like, I think if it's a Dash.io, it's like, oh, I'm going to bring in my Lean 60 and race this Mario, and the Mario presents a fatigue strategy into them, that's when Mario gets the edge. But in a sort of default case, I'm with you. It feels very coin flippy.
Yeah. So I think that for me is why you bring Dash.io. It's good / even into the 2 best decks in the format. It's very good into Gravy, and I think it's, you know, it's about 50-50 into Marionette. But then you are also facing some potential drop off from something like a Verdance. I think the KO matchup is good for you as well. I think you're just faster. So I think just general fatigue strategies are fallen away slightly. So I think, or I guess with right root bounds and stuff, you know, people are not necessarily just going to straight up fatigue you even when you do play into Earth. So I do think Dash.io is well positioned. And I think it's the premier true aggro deck, because I actually think Marionette is this kind of toolbox tempo disruptive aggro deck kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I want to tangent a little bit on your talk about fatigue strategy being not so relevant. Where are you at on the full fatigue Jarl? So just for a little bit more context, I think the rootbound ban, I feel a lot of people just kind of skipped over Jarl when talking about rootbound bans. Like, everyone focused on Verdance and Florin and how it affects them. But there was a strategy of Jarl, which was the more mid-rangey tempo Jarl that played Felling of the Crown, that actually did get affected by the rootbound ban as well. Because a lot of them actually weren't even on Plow often, and they definitely weren't on Tellings. They kind of really wanted the first rootbound to turn their Fellings online. Yep. That deck, I think, is severely kneecapped by the rootbound ban, and so it feels like Jarl now is defaulting to the pure Giga fatigue kind of cringe thing. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on where you think that hero is, because I think that could potentially be a little bit of a sleeper, and a little bit of a, like, people might want to respect that a little bit.
I don't think you can ever beat Kasai if they've played the matchup. I don't.
What's Kasai's game plan? Like, just find riches and then raise an army with riches gold?
Yeah, I think so. I think you just have inevitability, right? As Kasai, they can't pressure you, so you can also just set up big 5-card hands. I think as Kasai, unless you've like bordered in all your defense reactions and things like that. But as soon as they know what's up, I think, and if they get to sideboard against you in a top 8 situation, for instance, I think it's really, really hard for you to beat Kasai. I think Verdance is a nightmare for you. I don't think much about it, honestly. I think it's fine. I think it's serviceable. I think it's playable, but I don't think it's better than, like, to me it sits in like a similar tier to like a KO or maybe even something like a Syndra. I think Syndra's still playable, by the way. So I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not that interested.
I'd be keeping an eye on that just a little bit. Because he's a unique position. Like him and Gravy are a unique position where previously in the past, every time you talk about like a Giga Fatigue deck, you're like, this just loses to the illusionist of the format, right? It just loses to the Enigma, it loses to the Dromai. But Jarl's actually, the full Fatigue Jarl actually does beat Gravy because you can blow up the compass. And Gravy's damage is a lot, I don't know, it's a little bit more limited compared to like the previous board state decks. So because of that, I've been like, I think maybe an eye on this should be kept. Like, I don't know. Like, what if they come up, like for the Verdance matchup, for example, they come up with some stupid Warhorn triple poison the well strategy. Like, I don't know. I just don't know how much that has been explored. But I could see this hero maybe being a little bit of a menace. I think there are answers for it, though. I think Mario is a good matchup. Sorry, Mario is good into full Fatigue Girl. Once again, you're just constantly playing into T-Talks, and you just have only so many reactions. So Mario would be a check on the deck, but it's a deck I have an eye on.
Fair
Not
enough.
to play, but just as seeing his power level.
All right, what's your so we've given out 3. What's your deck that you're considering, and to what level do you think you could recommend this deck that you're going to talk to last?
Okay, so based on past experience, I will not recommend a deck that I myself haven't actually gone out and tested at least an RTN before.
Okay.
So that's why because I've jumped the gun in the past before. I've been like, oh no guys, I think this deck is it, before having actually played it at higher than like internal testing. So for that reason, to answer the second half of your question, I'm not gonna be like, everyone go play this. This is just from my internal testing and from my like perception, I guess. I think this deck is quite real right now, and that's Fang, and that is my sort of front runner for this weekend. And depending how it goes, potentially Columbus as well. I think given at least the 2 top decks that we both agree on, which is Gravy and Mario, I think Fang is good into both of them. And so I think immediately that's a good draw. As compared to like Kasai, right? Where Kasai is good into Gravy, but like weak into Mario. I think Fang is actually good into Mario. Because he gets access to a whole bunch of the hate cards.
Yep.
Hunt to the Hands of Wraith is just kind of brutal, like against Marinette. And then Gravy Bones is good for the same reason, similar reasons why Kasai is good. Not the exact same, that you don't have Bloodfaller's Blade, but eventually you'll get online. You still have the modality of killing allies efficiently, and eventually you get online and kind of just out card advantaging them. And of course, you also have the massive fridge. Verdance is obviously a problem. I don't think. Like that's just going to be unfavored. I think Verdance is like, you kind of need to dodge it or hope to get really, really lucky.
Same with Florian,
like,
right?
Come
Just
online
any
fast
Earth.
enough, and no, you're actually good into Florian.
Are you?
You're actually very positive in Florian.
Okay.
Yeah. You actually, because they can't stop you from getting online. They can't like, they don't have Scour, right? They don't have like Scour to like just kill all your fealty. Eventually you'll get to 3 because your deck is actually very difficult to block. Eventually you'll land a mark on them. You have a couple of pledge fealties. You'll get to 3, and then you just outvalue them. Because you're also having dynamos, right? They're not fast enough to deny you like a whole bunch of dynamo value over the course of the game, and they can't like just send Arcane at you the way Verdance can. Like Verdance is good because of Scour. There are turns where she doesn't give you dynamo value, and then there's Arcane damage you can't deal with. Whereas Florian, he's slow, you get dynamo value. He's always sending physical, you'll get dynamo value. You will get online, you get a card advantage. So that's the other reason why I think like Fang's decent, where like you are good into like Florian and some of these other like rogue decks. KO is a fine matchup as well. Because of the fridge, you do need D-reacts, like same for Mario. I think Fang is just looking pretty solid.
Interesting.
You have to put in some tech for Silo and Prism. I have 2 Amulets of Echo in my list. I have Poppers for Prism, and then you play the game. Verdance is the one I want to dodge. And then the others, I'm like, okay, I get to sit and play. And then I'm favored into Gravy and Mario.
You're favored into Mario. Okay. Yeah, I think my experience has been with Fang to beat the other aggro decks. So KO is a real thing. I don't think that's a good matchup for you.
Okay. KO I think is pretty close to even. Like I haven't gotten like insane reps on it, but like the few I have, I'm like we have chopped games basically.
Okay.
Actually a big reason why I'm looking at Fang now and not previously was Syndra's gone. I think to your point about aggro decks, Syndra was a predator for Fang, but she's not really around anymore. So that is why I'm looking at him. And if she comes back, to your point about she's not as bad anymore, if she comes back, I probably wouldn't be looking at Fang anymore.
Okay. Yeah, I think I can understand. I think from my perspective, if my friend was like, and my friend Pankaj here is saying, I'm thinking about sleeping Fang up this weekend, my question back to them would be, I guess my statement back to them be I'd be worried about KO, Marionette, and Dash IO, depending on your meta. But if you feel good into Marionette and KO, then I think that's a really good place to be. Deck might be busted. I don't know.
We'll see.
I really don't
again.
Like,
I
really don't
I can't sit here and be. That's fair. Again, I can't sit here and be like, all right, everyone, no, definitely go play this. I'm not trying to convince anyone. It's just I'm gonna go test it before recommending it, and then I'll report back, and we'll see.
I think I can
You
almost
tell me what's your wild card.
I think I can almost recommend mine. I think I have a lot of experience with this hero. I think it's in a pretty good spot. Florian. I think the root bound, we spoke about this a few weeks ago. Root bound ban, it might actually help Florian, was one of the things that I was putting out there, because I think to play Florian in a meta with Gravy Bones and Verdance and decks like this, I think the Florian's matchup into Verdance got better, because what would happen is Verdance would just sit back and you had to be the aggressor, because otherwise they could just chip you down over the course of the game. Now, Florian, you don't have to worry about them decomposing while they're being the defensive deck, which is really, really important. So you actually get to play more of a game against them. I think Gravy Bones obviously got a slight nerf, which is only helpful for Florian, but also the way that you are now building Florian, I think just means that naturally you have more space to play into Gravy Bones, because you're going to be more of a Channel Man Heroic deck anyway. Not saying it's a good matchup. But I do think that Marionette is a good matchup. I do think that Dash AO is a good matchup. I do think that KO is a good matchup. So I think you have those three decks as a good matchup, and then I think you have Verdance falling away and Gravy Bones. That is, I want to say it's now maybe like a 40%er for you, which is way, way, way better than it has ever been. I think your bad matchups are basically Gravy Bones and Syndra, and everything else you are okay or want to play against. So I think I could almost say I think Florian is a good pick. I think the Verdance matchup I need to play more of, and that's probably the only thing preventing me from wanting to play it this weekend, is if I think Verdance is gonna show up, then I'll probably play Dash AO or Gravy Bones.
I agree with everything you said. I do think the Verdance matchup, like the Rootbound ban, while it affected both of them, in that matchup specifically, hurt Verdance more than it hurt Florian. I'm definitely with you on that. Obviously, yep, go into Mario, and yeah, the Gravy matchup, bad, definitely. But you will play. It's not just go get lunch. Gravy obviously is vulnerable to a fair amount of variance in their end, and if you get your good CMH draws, you can actually just 100%. Run them over, or just be in a spot where you... I think what I've seen happen in like the good Florian draws in a matchup is you end up in a spot where you threaten the Gravy on the fatigue axis or the damage axis, and then if you can get to that spot, then yeah, you can win that matchup. Good to Kasai, good to KO. I agree with that. I think Florian is a deck that, at least internally, I know people are looking at as well. That, which also to some extent did influence my Fang choice as well, because I was like, wait, I think like Fang is going to Florian.
And Brit testing,
and again, I think another aspect of this, and this has been a bit of a running theme across like a lot of our top decks, Syndra not being around anymore.
Oh, it's huge.
Like, Syndra was a predator for Florian as
Definitely.
well. Like Syndra was positive for Florian, and the fact that she's gone as well, I think gives his deck a little bit more space.
100%. Cool. Those are our decks for Road to National Season. You're playing Fang this weekend, right? Is that correct?
Almost certainly. My default, my sort of backup, if like things go really wrong in the next 2 days, would be Verdance. Or is it Mario? It's probably Verdance, because it's probably Verdance, because like while they're both bad into Gravy, I think Verdance is slightly better into Gravy than Mario is. I feel like Mario into Gravy, they play a charm, and I just don't know what to do. It's probably just a reps thing as well. Whereas Verdance into Gravy, I have reps, so I know how I can win. Whereas I don't know that yet for Mario. So my backup is Verdance. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
You're between Florian and Dash IO?
I think I'm between Florian, Dash IO, and there's a slight chance I'd play either Marionette or Gravy Bones. I think I'm probably not going to play. I don't know. That's the thing. This is notorious me of not being able to pick a deck I want to play. So I don't know, honestly. the more we talk through this pod, the more we talk through this pod, the less confident I am in what I'm going to play.
So we're recording on a Friday for you, and your RTN's on Sunday, right?
Correct.
Okay. We're recording on Thursday for me, and my RTN's on Saturday. So we're both about the same duration away from our respective RTNs.
Exactly. Yeah. I think I'll sleeve up whatever I'm playing tonight, though. So I have to decide, to be honest.
I sleeved up Fang already. That was a deck I took to my armory this week, because I was like, I need to get my paper reps in this deck. And yeah.
I think if I play Gravy Bones, I need to find some ley lines. So that makes me less likely to play Gravy, I guess, because I have to go through the effort to try and find some or borrow some off a friend.
The card's pretty important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, hang on. You've made fun of me in the past for being way more organized with your collection than I have. Don't you have your binder with like your ley lines just nicely sorted and everything?
I just don't have them. I have my binder.
Oh,
nicely
you just
sorted,
never
but
own them.
I just
I see.
don't. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Got it.
I mean, I'll have a check. But I think I don't own them. I think maybe I have one. I don't know. Weirdly, just never got them. So.
Yeah, I forgot which set they were. Was it
They're
MST? It was MST, right?
Oh, are they?
I feel like it
No,
sounds
if they're
like an
MST, I
card.
definitely own them if they're from MST. I think they're from High Seas, right?
Looking
Pankaj
it up right
is
now.
looking it up.
That is MST. MST 193.
Oh, then I should have them. Never mind then. I should definitely have them. Unless I've lent them to someone and not gotten them back. Anyway, I think that's going to do it for this episode. Let's see what happens for this first Road to Nationals weekend. I think if I'm making any predictions, my predictions are KO doesn't win much. Gravy and Marionette have a really good weekend. And some of the decks that we spoke about, I'll tell you what, okay, here's a claim that might go against yours. I think Kasai will have an average weekend at best. There you go. There's a claim for you.
Okay.
I'm going to say, let me predict this. I reckon 4th most winning deck, Kasai, this weekend.
Oh, and that's... Oh, I suppose that's like average. I would say that's pretty decent. I guess. No, actually, I'll go
not
higher than
third.
that. Okay, so I think Gravy's going to be top, followed by Mario. And actually, I think... Ooh... It's actually probably Verdant's third and Kasai fourth. I think you're right. I think it's going to be Gravy, Mario, Verdant's, Kasai.
We'll
in
see.
that order for like number of wins.
The only reason I don't think Verdant's would be the third most deck when it comes to win share this weekend is just because of how much will be played. That's all I think is kind of stopping that, potentially.
Fair.
All right. Any final predictions from you, Pankaj, before we sign off?
I think we might be 2 weeks too soon for his prediction, but I think Prism's going to pick up.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think 2 weeks too soon. But we'll see.
Yeah.
All right. That has been episode 200.
Wait. What's your predictions? Do you have any
I made it.
predictions?
I made it. That Kasai is not going to be the third winning.
Oh, I see. That's your... Got it.
And that Gravy Bones and Mario will be 1 and 2. That's kind of it. Okay. That will do it for episode 246 of Arsenal Pass. Thank you to all the Arsenal Pass patrons. Good luck to everyone playing Road to Nationals this weekend. Get your qualification for Nationals. And until next week, we will see you in the next episode.